We're continuing with the rest of the last parak of Masech Debeya, parak Hey, Mishnah Dalet. Hashoel klime chaverim erev yamtiv kiragle hashoel. If one borrowed a utensil from a restaurant before yamtiv, it has the tchum of the borrower because it was in the borrower's possession. It was in the shoel's possession at the beginning of yamtiv when the tchum was determined. Since it's in the borrower's possession when the yamtiv began, it assumes his tchum even though he doesn't own it. This halacha applies even if the owner of the utensil merely promised for yamtiv to lend it to the borrower, and the borrower didn't actually take the keli until after yamtiv began. Promising to lend the object transfers it immediately to the shoel's possession with respect to the hilchas tchumen, which is interesting because in hilchas kinyanim it probably does not work like that. B'yamtiv kiragle hamashil. However, if one borrowed something on yamtiv, it has a tchum of the mashil, the lender, the one who's lending it out, because it was in the lender's possession when yamtiv began. Even if the person borrows the object every yamtiv, it doesn't assume his tchum unless he borrowed it before yamtiv. Ha'isha sheshala mechaverta tavlin u'mayim u'melach li'isasa hare ilu kiragle shteim. If on yamtiv a woman borrowed from her friend spices for food or water or salt for her dough, hare ilu kiragle shteim, the food or the dough that she makes, has the tchum of both the lender and the borrower. Since the food or dough is a mixture of ingredients that belong to two people yamtiv began, it has the restrictions of both of the tchumen. So it may be moved only to a place where their tchumen overlap, which ends up becoming very interesting, where it could go and where it can't go. Rabbi Yehuda paiter b'mayim mipnei she'en be'em mamish. Rabbi Yehuda excludes water from this restriction because it has no substance. Water loses its substance when it becomes absorbed into the dough. The same applies to any thick food that completely absorbs the water. So it doesn't have its own tchum. In fact, the ordinary salt is also not noticeable in dough. And the Mishnah refers to coarse salt, which is noticeable. Therefore, the dough has only the tchum of the person who owns the dough and not the tchum of the one who gave the water. Mishnah Hey, Hagacheles kiragle habaylam. A burning coal has the tchum of its owner. The owner is the person who had it in his possession when yamtiv began. But a flame may be moved anywhere. Since a flame is not a tangible object, it's not subject to the hilchos tchumen at all. Therefore, if someone took a flame by lighting a candle from another person's flame, the candle is not limited to the tchum of the flame's original owner. There's a lot of different shilas how this could play out. There's a discussion in the Gemara about moving a shalheves from a Rishus Rabbim on Shabbos, removing a gacheles from Rishus Rabbim Stam. How it changed because the fire is constantly renewing itself, and that's the mitzvah of fire, so it changes automatically. It's an interesting sugya. Hopefully we'll get to discuss it at a later point in time. Gacheles shel hektish mo'elim ba. The Mishnah mentions another halacha that distinguishes between a coal and a flame. The halacha concerns the isra of me'ilah, using hektish, which is property that's sacred to the Beis HaMikdash for private purposes. So one who uses a burning coal of hektish, a gacheles of hektish, for his own purposes, is over the isra of me'ilah. One who commits me'ilah must pay the Beis HaMikdash the monetary value of the benefit he gained, plus 1/4 as a fine, and he must bring in asham me'ilas as well. However, with regard to a flame of hektish, one may not benefit from it. It's asam with rabbanon to light a candle from a flame belonging to hektish. The rabbanon asked the person to use a flame of hektish that are concerned that he might become used to using tangible items of hektish also, which is asam with raisa. But if he does, even if he uses the shalheves of hektish, he's not over in the Isra Me'ilah Daraisa since it's not a tangible object. One who moves a burning coal into Rishus Rabbim on Shabbos is chayiv, having done the malacha of Eitzah, shall have his pater. One who moves only a flame is pater since he didn't move a tangible object. He fanned the flame that was in a private Rishus and making him move into a public Rishus, into Rishus Rabbim. So Shalheves, Gacheles, is chayiv, Shalheves is pater. It's very geshmak sugya. Hopefully, we'll get to it one day. Water taken from a well owned by a private person has the tchum of that person. Water from a well jointly owned by all the people of the town has the same tchum as all the people in the town. As mentioned in Mishnah Gimel, the tchum for the people in the town ends 2,000 amos from the town's borders. Water from a public well dug by travelers from Bavel. Wells were dug near the roads to provide water for the people traveling from Bavel to the Beis HaMikdash for the 3 Yomim Tevim, for the Shalosh Regalim. So that has the tchum of the one who draws the water. This type of well is considered hefker. Therefore, water drawn from it assumes the tchum of the person who drew it, and Mamela, that person is kind of shvisa. That the water is kind of shvisa right there. Mishnah Vav, Misha Hayu Peiroisa B'Iracheres, if one's produce is in a different town that's more than 2,000 amos away from him, and the people of that town made an erev tchumen to enable them to bring him some of his produce. They may not bring it to him, since objects are confined to the tchum of their owner, and this produce is outside its owner's tchum. It may not be brought to him. Now, what's the problem over here? The problem is that even though he has erev tchumen, but because the object is confined to the tchum of its owner, so they can't move it out of the tchum. The bailam has to be the one that moves it. The people of the town made an erev tchumen that was within 2,000 amos of the town, and within 2,000 amos of the owner. The erev then allows them to walk to him. They thought that they'd also be allowed to take his produce with them, but they were mistaken in this because an erev is effective only for the people who made it, and not for any other person or his possessions. Therefore, the erev has no effect on the produce, which remains limited to the tchum of its owner, like we just explained. Vim erev hu peirosav kamayu. However, if the owner made an eruv so that his tchum extends to his produce is treated like himself, that is, the produce may be taken anywhere within his new tchum. In this case, then, the people of the town may bring it to him. This is allowed only if the people of the town also made an eruv, meaning an eruv that extends their tchum to the place of the owner, as in the Mishnah's previous case, because if not, they themselves would be usher to walk to him. Final Mishnah in the Parak and in the Masechta, Mishnah Zayin. Misha Zimin Etzle Orchem. If someone invited guests from outside his tchum, who come to him on Yom Tov by means of their own erev tchumen, they may not take portions of food home with them. Since the food belonged to the bailam at the start of Yom Tov, it may not be taken out of the tchum. Even though he gave the food to his guests on Yom Tov, it remains confined to the tchum it had at the start of Yom Tov. The guests may take home food only if the host had given them ownership of their portions before Yom Tov. It's possible for him to give them ownership of the food even before they arrive in his house, because one can transfer ownership of an object to another person even if the second person is not present, by giving it to a third party who takes possession of it on the recipient's behalf, and it's nichlal in the halacha of zachan li'adam shalai b'fanav. And in that case, if a person is mezakeh it to the guests before Yom Tov, the food assumed the tchum of the guests. Ein mashkin v'sheichtin esamid bariyos. We may not give water to and then shecht the roaming animals on Yom Tov because they are muktzah. Since the animals that roam freely are not readily accessible, the owner did not intend to use them on Yom Tov, and they are thus muktzah. The Mishnah means to forbid only slaughtering these animals. Feeding and giving water to one's animals is perfectly mutter on Yom Tov. The Mishnah mentions giving water only to impart some practical advice. A person should give water to an animal before shechting it because it makes the animals easier to skin. Aval mashkin v'sheichtin is habaysos. We may give water and shech domestic animals. Elu hein habaysos halonis be'ir. Domestic animals are those animals that spend the night in the town or in an inhabited area. Midbariyos halonis ba'afar. Roaming animals are those that spend the night in the pasture. V'meila, that's why they will not have the din of being able to be shechted on Yom Tov.